what is more harmful, inaccurate history or passionate fiction?
Accurate history and, well, just going back to the sort of question of facts and so on, I mean, what people have said, I agree with them. It's never an issue of really inaccuracy of facts or falsifying facts. I mean, any good historian, is not confronted with those questions. The question really is, how do you arrange all your facts and use your facts to offer an interpretation? How do you interpret those facts? And most of the debate is really around those. You take an example from the dispute over Ram Janmabhoomi. Okay, so you have certain historians saying there was a temple. Now, another group of historians, looked at the evidence, looked at the archaeological record, and said, there's no record of this. Now, did that settle the dispute? No, because the two groups came with very different notions of history. You had one group of historians who had a notion of history which was based on, a rational judgment or a rational interpretation of facts, and another group for whom history was faith. If I believed that there was a temple, that was enough. Now, when this dispute took place, it actually masqueraded as a dispute over history, but actually it was a dispute about the present. It was a dispute about how Hindus and Muslims will live in this country. And it was presented as a question of historical wrong that must be now corrected. But actually it was really a question of, will we treat each other as equals, or will we say, because, your ancestors destroyed my temple, therefore I'll treat you as second-class citizens? But, that question was, the history was really a proxy for an urgent current political situation.
I would have a slightly different take on that, because I don't think it was a dispute between two groups of historians. I would say it was a dispute between historians who, I think without exception, would say, A, there is no historical basis for the Ramayana, therefore there can be no historical basis for saying Ayodhya was the birthplace of Ram, or that there should have been a temple there to mark that. As against that, you had a religious view, which you could equate in the West with creationist views of the world, which says, God created the world was created out of seas of butter being churned, Ram was, and that is the view of the Hindutva brigade, the RSS, etc. That I don't think I would dignify them with the title of historians. But I think where there are genuine debates between historians, and I think perfectly valid ones, are if you look at, say, the history of partition, or if you look at the history of World War I, which is being at the moment commemorated in the West. There are major kind of differences between the way a German historian would interpret it, a British historian, a French historian, a Russian historian, or an American one. And I think those are perfectly valid historical differences of emphasis,
but
working within a historical discipline, not bringing in religious fantasy.
No, but Zarir, I mean, that was exactly the stance taken by secular historians in 1992, 93. They said, what you're presenting is not history. And, as a historian, I have sympathy for that position, that I also, base myself on evidence, record, and so on. But the issue was, in a way, not really history. It was really a question of politics, in which history was, the language in which a political battle was being fought out. And so I think, if you wanted to address that political question, I don't think it was enough to say, you're not a historian, and you have bad history. I don't even consider you history. And as a professional historian, I can tell you that there's no basis for your belief. I don't think that really, addressed the political issue at hand.
So let's take this further. In that case, where you have essentially a political discussion masquerading as a historical discussion, what makes history such a seductive language to speak?
Because everyone wants to claim the authority of the past, you know, but I think, as Gyan says himself, it's a political argument, it's not a historical argument. I wouldn't dignify it with the title of a historical argument. And the fact that there are, I mean, the Nazis claimed historical basis for the protocols of the Zions of the elders of Zion, massacring Christian babies and drinking their blood. I wouldn't say, that was a historical argument. So history has always been, brought in as a handmaiden to extreme political fascistic ideologies. But I'm more interested in, I think, what are more interesting debates between historians about historical subjects, not trying to score political points.
But do you think history is too important to be left to the historians?
No. I mean, professional history is, like any kind of professional knowledge, is a particular kind of knowledge. And I would say history in the sense of the past. And, there are many ways in which people understand the past. There are ways to understand the past through literature. There's a way to understand the past through poetry. Professional history is one particular way to address the past. The question really, where you're saying, why is it everyone claims a history? It is because, history gives you a sense of origin. You can create, it's like biography. The people often identify themselves by presenting a biography. I came from such and such place. And we did this, and when you were talking about partition, you said, I belong to a partition family, That invocation of history gives you a certain sense of, kind of gravity, it's like beer mein hota hai na, it gives you certain sedimentation. And that's why people kind of really fight over it, because it gives you identity, it gives you a place, it gives you origins.
Right, so we're going to go with the man in the hat, and then the lady in the blue, and then the gentleman with the bag.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Oh, someone already has a mic? Go for it, wherever you are. Who has the mic already? Go ahead, ask your question. I can't see you, but ask your question.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah,
Hello,
I
good
see you
evening.
now.
And it's been an honor to be a part of literature.
Put your mic.
It's been an honor to be a part of Literature Carnival Festival. Yes, it is a very sensitive topic, as you just discussed. As you just discussed that regarding I'm a history student. I have majored in history, and since childhood we've been learning history. But I just want to ask you a question. Why is it that in India the education system has hampered history a lot? They have changed it the way they want, and it's not the way it has been in past. We've seen a lot of movies like Rang De Basanti and any kind of movies in India. But then I feel that India is a country which has culture and diversity, and nothing to do as such in religious views. The way Sir had just said that, yes, it is regarding Ayodhya temple as well, we've heard, and what has happened in the past. So I would just like to say that we should not go ahead and hurt anybody's sentiments in any case, like saying that a particular culture or B particular culture is like that. I feel that history is, yes, to do with the past and to do with the present as well. And we are here to change the future. Politically, yes, politics is chosen by us, for the people, by the people and of the people. And we are the people who make them they are. We are not here to discriminate between two religious diversities.
Okay, thank you. Next, there was some mics over there. Yeah.
Okay, my question is about history in the sense that everybody has been talking about appropriation of history by various individuals and even political parties. And now that we are nearing elections next year, we've increasingly been reading about more and more nationalistic figures being used by certain political parties. So what is the solution over here in terms of, can we see some kind of activism, not just from historians, but maybe also from novelists, some kind of a retelling in a way that people really understand. Maybe language has a role to play in there, maybe a different play of language or something. But can you really kind of speak about how do you address this appropriation in today's times?
Okay, so that's on. And there was one more person, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just wondering, like, is it really possible to view history through a period eye? Like E.H. Carr says, like, what is written is as much about, like, the event as who is writing it. In that sense, you think there's a common ground between historians and novelists, that they are inevitably colored by their background?
Okay, so two questions. One on appropriation. How does one address the problem of historical appropriation? And the other was on the kind of synergies between novelists and historians, which I think we've dealt with at some length. But let's look at appropriation.
Talk about appropriation.
Do you want to answer that?
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
She asked a question on how do we address the problem of historical appropriation, where groups appropriate figures and use them for their political ends. That was her question.
Well, that bias is always there. The agenda of politicians is always there. Each country has its own agenda and they advance that. And appropriation is always there. I mean, that's human nature to be slightly devious, you know. And you have to accept facts for what they are.
I think you do it by being democratic about allowing free speech. So you don't ban people for making whatever the comments they want to make about Ayodhya or Ram Janmabhoomi, or about you don't ban the satanic verses because Muslims don't want it. You know, I think these are issues where I think free speech is really important. And so you don't allow religious, revivalist or fundamentalist narratives to ban free expression, which unfortunately in this country is happening, both whether it offends Hindus or Muslims.
I'm referring to your point of history needs to be written.
No, sir.
I'm referring to your point that history needs to be written every 20 years. However, it is said that history repeats itself and historians repeat each other. Now, if one event is to be rewritten by the similar event in the future, then how relevant it is to rewrite an event of the past? That is what my question is.
Okay.
Somebody here.
And there's someone. Yeah, everyone just come up with questions, yes? Like things with a question mark at the end. That's a question.
I was amused by Mr. Basani's remarks on the fact. Would he please elaborate on them? The remarks I remember are, one person's fact is another person's fiction. Facts keep changing. Facts select themselves. Will you please elaborate on that?
That was me, I think. I said,
Yeah, Mr. Basani.
Yeah, one person's fact is another's fiction. Well, it's like one man's meat is another's poison. And it's the fact that if history can be written from different perspectives, and we have different narratives coming out of different cultures, different generations, different sources, because historians can have access to very different source materials. So I don't think there is any such thing as a totally neutral fact. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not like history. Some people say history is an art. Some people say it's a social science. I think it's both. But even if it's a social sciences are not natural sciences. They don't come up with precise, objective, independent results. That was my point.
Right. Any other guys? Any other questions? Have we exhausted everyone's curiosity? Okay. There's a...
Yeah, sure. We've been talking a lot about partition over a period of time. We've been talking a lot about partition and about sort of the effects that it ended up having, where, you know, we have India and Pakistan, but we also had the British leaving at that point. And there's a constant repetition in our culture, and particularly right now because we're coming up to our elections, about this idea of Western ideology versus Indian ideology, Hindus versus Muslims, and it's inevitably a question of segregation. I was wondering if you could talk about like the issues of local ghettoization that actually come in and how historical narratives in some sense are contributing to this.
I don't think we got that. Just like, did you get that?
No, I didn't.
Can you rephrase that slowly, one sentence with a question mark at the end?
Okay. I said basically that we've received a whole bunch of historical narratives that are coming with regard to Westernization, and Indian ethos. And I was wondering whether you could talk about the fact that history very often and a clash of cultures is being used to justify local ghettoization and how that's playing in with fiction and history.
How is international conversations about clashes of civilization, how is that leading to ghettoization in kind of local communities? How is it that a universal discourse becomes a particular discourse in ideas of Hindu versus Muslim, Western ideology, Indian ideology?
Any kind of, let's say, international discourse such as clash of civilization, for it to acquire any sort of local life, it has to have some connections with, either experiences or politics of the period. That's not your question? No.
What's your question?
My question is basically, we're being told constantly we need to preserve our culture. We're being told constantly that we need to move forward, right? And increasingly right now, with the question of preserving and moving forward, we're getting a ghettoization. Local communities are keeping to themselves, and in some sense, historical precedent is being used to justify this. Hindu Muslims are being told to live in their own colonies.
Sounds really bad, I can't believe.
Okay, so I'm going to try and tell you what I think her question was. I think her question this time was, I think the question was about the tension between A, preserving your culture, and B, being told that you must move forward. So this tension of, oh dude. You want to ask them this after the session, where they can actually hear you. Yeah, so we're going to call this to a close. And thank you all for bearing with us and the audio. And